I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. MessianicApologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for June the 18th, 2025. Right now, it is fair to say that we continue to watch the Israel-Iran conflict. There are talks of the Shah coming back, talks of regime change, but also growing tensions and the question of whether or not Iran is going to receive any kind of support or at least bolstering by their customary partners, at least Russia and China. We will wait and see. And along with that, we're also seeing a diversity of opinions expressed here in the United States from conservatives who maybe they support Israel, maybe they don't. And some, well, will support Israel in a defensive capacity, but not in an offensive capacity. So there are a lot of different dynamics at work right now, and we need to be paying attention and asking the Lord, what can we learn from this? Because there are many who think that this is not the final conflict by any means, but when it is over, we will see a different kind of Middle East, and it's from that where we'll see different end-time prophetic things set in motion. All right, so we're going to start off with a very important theology roundup. In our ongoing discussion, especially when things turn to the well-known and sometimes hard-fought rapture debate between pre- and post-tribulationists, it's commonly brought up that, well, a pre-tribulation rapture is supported when you consider examples like those of Noah, Lot, and Rahab. Well, our ministry has definitely addressed this. If you'll go to outreachisraelbookstore.com, here you'll see our ministry publication, The Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism, which addresses many of the common reasons given in support of a pre-tribulation rapture. Now, I need to say to you now that we're not going to be offering this publication that much longer. It doesn't mean we are retiring the material. Many of you all have heard my updates regarding the combined When Will the Messiah Return? Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism book. That is going to be available this summer. I am finishing up the final new chapter, which is being added, and then I have to write a 2025 introduction for it. So we're not going to be offering Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism by itself anymore. The material, of course, is still going to be made available. And the main reason why we're combining it into a single volume is many people, they get When Will the Messiah Return, and they don't know that there's more that's been compiled on the rapture debate, or vice versa. They think Dangers is great, but I didn't know there was this When Will the Messiah Return book. So we're combining it into a single volume, and there's going to be more information on the status of prophecy, as well as what this release will lead to in terms of further studies and analyses. All right, so I've got to switch windows, but we're going to be accessing material from the new combined When Will the Messiah Return? Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism, addressing this specific reason often given in support of the pre-trib rapture, which is, it is characteristic of divine dealing to deliver believers before a divine judgment is inflicted upon the world, as illustrated in the deliverance of Noah, Lot, Rahab, etc. 2 Peter 2, 6 through 9. Many of you have doubtlessly heard this common reason given in support of the pre-trib rapture. And indeed, some people only need that. They often will not. What happened with Noah? What happened with Lot? What happened with Rahab? And does it truly give support for the pre-trib rapture? Regardless of what is happening right now in the Middle East, we do need to conduct more studies on the end times. All right, so to answer this, 2 Peter 2, 6 through 9 is provided as evidence to support the belief that a deliverance, by extension meaning some kind of a removal, must occur prior to the tribulation period. Let us examine these verses in their entirety so we know that we are properly applying the Tanakh Old Testament typology, as the Apostle Peter asserted. And God did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a preacher of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. And if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example to those who would live ungodly lives thereafter, and if he rescued righteous Lot, oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men, for by what he saw and heard, that righteous man, while living among them, felt his righteous soul tormented day after day by their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from temptation and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment. 2 Peter 2, 5 through 9, New American Standard. It is very true that the Lord did indeed provide deliverance to Noah, Lot, and Rahab, the 3 biblical characters specifically mentioned prior to the flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the conquering of Jericho by the ancient Israelites. But is this a conclusive proof for pre-tribulationism? Let us review what the Tanakh Old Testament actually communicates about the judgment, and thus when the deliverance of these people actually took place. Okay, the first example, Noah and the flood. The account of Noah is the first example given in support of the pre-tribulation rapture. It is important to properly understand the story of Noah because Yeshua said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." Matthew 24:37, New International Version. What occurred during the flood of Genesis chapters 6 through 8 is going to repeat itself in some capacity. As a backdrop to the flood, Noah was 500 years old, and Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis 5:32, New American Standard. It is important to know what Noah's age was here, because Noah was 600 years old when the flood of water came upon the earth. Then Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him entered the ark because of the water of the flood. Genesis 7, 6 through 7, New American Standard. Interestingly enough, the Bible Knowledge Commentary, Old Testament, edited by John Wolverd and Roy B. Zuck, states, Genesis Commentary by Alan P. Ross, the following in regard to the time gap between Noah's sons being born at his age of 500 and then the flood coming when he was 600. Quote, even though swift judgment would fall because God's Spirit would not always shield mankind, the judgment would be delayed 120 years. Verse 3. During this time, Noah was a preacher of righteousness. 2 Peter 5:5. Unquote. This belief of a delay of 120 years is based on an interpretation of God's words in Genesis 6:3. My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. New American Standard. While there are varying views of this verse, there was about a century between Noah's sons being born and the flood occurring. This period was the time when Noah prepared for the judgment, building the ark and preparing it for the animals which would be carried by it. 2 Peter 2:5 states that Noah was a herald of righteousness, Revised Standard Version. The specific Greek word, often mistranslated preacher, is kerux, actually meaning a herald, pursuivant, marshal, public messenger. In its secular context, it meant a crier who made proclamation in the public assemblies, from the Liddell Scott lexicon. While Noah was not a preacher in the modern sense of the word, Noah did warn others of the impending judgment to come during the proposed 100 to 120 years, at the very least by his actions of obedience to God. Sadly, the parallel today is that many pre-tribulationists do not often emphasize the judgment of God upon the world and the required repentance from fallen human beings, but instead emphasize escape and their inability to endure through any difficult times. Noah prepared himself and his family for the judgment which was to come, and then at the very end of the preparations, at the very last moment, the flood came. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened. The rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, entered the ark, they and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, all sorts of birds. So they went into the ark to Noah by twos of all flesh, in which was the breath of life. Those that entered, male and female of all flesh, entered as God had commanded him, and the Lord closed it behind him. Genesis 7:11 through 16, New American Standard. Was Noah raptured, as many pre-tribulationists like to imply? No, he was not. But Noah was kept safe by the Lord in the ark he had commanded him to build. Noah was fully aware of the floodwaters around him while in the massive boat. The Orthodox Jewish art scroll Chumash actually indicates, quote, the sages add that the waters were scalding hot, unquote. Talmud Sanhedrin 108b. Whether this is true or not, and I am inclined to regard this as speculation, Noah knew the tribulation going on around him, as the world of sinful humanity was being wiped out. Then the flood came upon the earth for 40 days, and the water increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. The water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. Genesis 7:17 and 18, New American Standard. Knowing this is crucial to understanding Yeshua's words in Matthew 24:37 to 39. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24:37 to 39, New American Standard. When seeing how Noah was preparing himself and his family for around a century prior to the flood, and the Messiah's words where he said that people were going on as normal until the flood came and took them away, then one can see how claiming Noah as a type of the pre-tribulation rapture has poor support. Noah was removed from the scene at the very last possible moment, not long before the final judgment. Those taken away were not brought up to heaven, excuse me, but were swept away in judgment by the flood, suddenly and swiftly. This is important to recognize because when Yeshua arrives, his return will be swift and sudden to those not paying attention or purposefully ignoring the signs. They will be judged suddenly, just like those in the flood. Believers will be taken up to safety above the judgment at the Messiah's appearing right before he returns to the earth. Our second example to consider, commonly offered in support of the pre-tribulation rapture, is Sodom and Gomorrah. The second example given for a pre-tribulation rapture is the story of Lot and how he was removed from the judgment upon Sodom and Gomorrah. This too is very important because Yeshua alluded to it in Luke 17:28-30 in regard to the last days and his return. It was the same as happened in the days of Lot. They were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planting, they were building. But on the day that Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. It will be just the same on the day that the Son of Man is revealed. Luke 17:28-30, New American Standard. Prior to the Lord destroying the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were debauched with problems of extreme homosexuality, Abraham pleaded for God not to judge them. He pleaded that if specific numbers of righteous persons be found within the cities, that the judgment be spared. So the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the whole place on their account. And Abraham replied, now behold, I have ventured to speak to the Lord, although I am but dust and ashes. Suppose the 50 righteous are lacking 5. Will you destroy the whole city because of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. He spoke to him yet again and said, suppose 40 are found there. And he said, I will not do it on account of the 40. Then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I shall speak. Suppose 30 are found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, now behold, I have ventured to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of the 20. Then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I shall speak only this once. Suppose 10 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of the 10. Genesis 18:26-32, New American Standard. Unfortunately, 10 righteous were not found in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lawlessness, in the true sense of the word, reigned supreme in these places. As a result, the Lord sent 2 angels to Lot for him and his family to evacuate the city immediately. Notice how Lot was not entirely enthusiastic about the messenger's visit and asked them to spend the night at his house and then for them to go on their way. Does this non-enthusiasm possibly picture many believers who are awaiting the second coming of the Lord? How many people would rather be in the world than enter into the new world of peace and true harmony which is awaiting in God's kingdom on earth? Now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. And he said, Now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house, and spend the night, and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way. They said, however, no, but we shall spend the night in the square. Genesis 19, 1 and 2, New American Standard. After Lot greeted the angels and brought them into his house, the men of Sodom became anxious and wanted Lot to present these two men to them so they might know them. Genesis 19:5, New American Standard. Instead, Lot offered them his two virgin daughters, whom they refused. Genesis 19:7 and 8. The men became rowdy, and they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break the door of his house. Genesis 19:19, New American Standard. Already, one should ask where the implication of a pre-tribulation rapture is. It seems that the sin and lawlessness were so surrounding Lot and his family that they were just going to have to get out while they still had a chance. Not like the pre-trib scenario of the rapture occurring and only then sin and lawlessness abounding. At the breaking point, the men of Sodom, the Sodomites, tried to break into Lot's house. Then the two men said to Lot, "Whom else have you here? A son-in-law and your sons and your daughters, and whomever you have in the city, bring them out of the place, or we are about to destroy this place, because their outcry has become so great before the Lord that the Lord has sent us to destroy it." Genesis 19:12 and 13, New American Standard. At the very last moment, Lot was delivered by the angels from the judgment to befall Sodom. He was not removed from the city 7 days prior to the destruction being poured out. In fact, it is recorded. But he hesitated. So the men seized his hand and the hand of his wife and the hands of his two daughters. For the compassion of the Lord was upon him, and they brought him out and put him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, and do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, or you will be swept away." Genesis 19:16 and 17, New American Standard. Before the angels forcibly removed him from the city, still he delayed. New Jewish Publication Society version. Of course, Bible readers know what happens. Excuse me. As they left the city, Lot's wife looked back and she was turned into a pillar of salt. The sun had risen over the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But his wife, from behind him, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Genesis 19:23 through 26, New American Standard. Lot's wife lingered and could not keep up with the rest of her family. Why was this the case? Was it because of all she was leaving behind in Sodom? Was it because she could not leave her possessions? Some have speculated that she not only looked back on Sodom, but actually ran into the city as the judgment was falling. We may never know the exact answer, but it is important to realize that the reason why so many believers are unexcited about the return of Yeshua is because of what they will have to give up and leave behind in regard to their earthly lives and possessions. It is for this reason why the Messiah said the following in Luke 17:31 to 33. On that day, the one who is on the housetop and whose goods are in the house must not go down to take them out, and likewise the one who is in the field must not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to keep his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will preserve it. Luke 17:31 to 33, New American Standard. When properly understanding the story of Lot, there is no support for the pre-tribulation rapture in it at all. Lot was removed from Sodom at the very last moment prior to the judgment coming. He was not removed a substantial amount of time before the judgment, as pre-tribulationism would imply. The text speaks of a sudden judgment and would allude to believers being removed from planet Earth just prior to the day of the Lord occurring. And our third and final example. Rahab and the fall of Jericho. The third example given is that of Rahab, the prostitute from Jericho who assisted the Israelite spies in their defeat of the city. Rahab was spared from the judgment which was to befall Jericho. But does her deliverance from the attack give a person any reason to believe in a pre-tribulation rapture? Joshua 6:12 through 14 details what happened prior to the attack on Jericho. Now Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while they continued to blow the trumpets. Thus the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did so for 6 days. Joshua 6:12 through 14, New American Standard. The people of Jericho were given adequate warning that the Israelites were going to attack. The priests carried the Ark of the Covenant and blew shofars marching around the city for a period of 6 days. On the 7th day, the Israelites attacked. Then on the 7th day, they rose early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day, they marched around the city 7 times. At the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city shall be under the ban. It and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent." Joshua 6:15 through 17, New American Standard. It is very interesting that the attack upon Jericho occurred on the 7th day. If the 7 days are a type of the 70th week of Israel, then it indicates that the final battle occurs in the last part of this time period. The people of Jericho, representing the people of the world, were given an adequate warning by the people of God, but only Rahab and her family were spared, and the rest were defeated. So the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brothers and all she had. They also brought out all her relatives and placed them outside the camp of Israel. They burned the city with fire and all that was in it. Only the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared, and she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day, for she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Joshua 6:23 to 25, New American Standard. The story of Rahab does not picture any kind of pre-tribulation rapture of the holy ones or saints. Rather, it indicates once again that right before the final judgment comes, God's people will be removed. And in this case, the major judgment comes on the 7th or last day out of a period of 7, not on the 1st. All right, and finally, to summarize this, after reviewing the records of Noah, Lot, and Rahab, is the premise of believers being removed prior to divine judgment valid? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that believers are removed from the divine judgment, as the judgments Noah, Lot, and Rahab were spared from are each a legitimate foreshadowing of the future day of the Lord. No, in that they are not removed long before this final judgment occurs. Each one of them was removed at the very last moment, and those judged were given an adequate time to know what was to befall them. The pattern is not for believers to be removed, then for the world to continue on, not knowing what is coming, and then for sinners to finally be judged. The accounts of Noah, Lot, and Rahab should teach Messiah followers to be ready to be removed from the scene at the last minute. So you can see from our analysis here that those of us who adhere to more of a post-tribulational gathering of the holy ones or saints definitely have an answer to those who claim that Noah, Lot, and Rahab are supports for a pre-tribulation rapture. And we've got to switch screens back. And yes, this is something which came from our ministry publication, Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism, which is being merged with When Will the Messiah Return? And that updated resource will be available later in the summer. All right, so that concludes our theology roundup. We do have some important news to go through. The news cycle right now is absolutely dominated by the Israel-Iran conflict. I just want everyone to know that we do the news summary after the theology summary because everything is time sensitive, everything changes, and it is possible that there have been some changes which have taken place since I checked the news at around 12:30 p.m. before going live at 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time. There are a lot of things we do need to be paying attention to. History is unfolding. Everyone can agree on that. Whether or not specific prophecies are being fulfilled, we need to be careful with what we say. We do need to be guarded. I sent out a post on X, formerly Twitter, to the effect that, why don't I just pull this up so you all can actually see what I said? Because this is something which I take very, very seriously, and I think that not enough people pay attention to it. Okay, so here we go. This was from earlier today. All of us need to be paying attention to current events, history unfolding, God's plan taking shape. We all agree there. But many were not around for or do not remember all of the false end-time predictions of the late 1990s and early 2000s. All of the dates which came and went. All of the recalculations of recalculations which proved false. Let's learn from those who spoke and acted presumptuously. Okay, so there is going to be a lot of that taking place right now, and we need to take that into serious consideration. Let's not speak presumptuously. There are a lot of people who think that they could calculate the return of the Lord, and I'm going to leave it there, purposefully ambiguous, because some of it involves this system, some of it involves that system. Yeshua, in his Olivet Discourse, does not in any way, shape, or form endorse people calculating the return of the Lord. He has directed his disciples to look instead for socio-religious political signs. All right? So you can't calculate the return of the Lord. Instead, you're supposed to be monitoring what is taking place in the world, socially, religiously, and politically. All right, so let's get into some of the news. All right, so this is from yesterday, June the 17th. It hit after we concluded our live stream for Messianic Insider. Iranian Crown Prince Pahlavi Reza just gave a speech to the nation. All it takes now is a nationwide uprising to put this nightmare to an end. May I be with you soon. So here we have the exiled Crown Prince of Persia, the son of the deposed Shah. He's been living in exile mainly in the United States, and he is calling for the people of Iran to rise up and to facilitate his return, and with it a return to what was lost in the Islamic Revolution. Is that going to happen? Is it not going to happen? We definitely see people right now already calling for regime change. Will it happen? Will it not happen? We don't know. We can hope it could happen, but hard to tell. From open source intel yesterday afternoon, June the 17th, it is crazy in Tehran right now. Wow. We're not there on the ground. We have to use some wisdom and discernment regarding how accurate or inaccurate some of these things are. But we do know it's not a safe place to be. Changes are taking place. From Newsmax yesterday, June the 17th, breaking news. In his most forceful statement against Iran yet, President Donald Trump on Tuesday called for Iran's unconditional surrender. We also know from seeing the Trump presidency, both the first term and now his second term, Trump will enact maximum pressure, maximum threat in order to bring people to the negotiating table. Because we do see later that Trump is still hoping for some kind of a negotiated settlement. From the Epoch Times yesterday, June the 17th, President Donald Trump on Tuesday called for the Iranian regime's unconditional surrender in the Israel-Iran war and threatened the life of Iran's supreme leader if he orders missile strikes against civilians or American troops. In a series of messages on social media on June the 17th, Trump said, "We have full control over Iranian airspace," and stated that the United States knows exactly where Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is hiding, calling him an easy target, but saying he would not be killed, at least not for now. This does indicate tensions are building. It's no longer just with Israel, it's with the United States. I thought this was interesting. Of course, this is something which can be affected by unfolding events. This is from Arjen Wexler's channel on X. Iranian alliance status check. Russia out. Saudi Arabia out, quietly supporting Israel. Syria out, allowing Israel an airspace. China quiet. Candace Owens in. Of course, we are going to certainly hear from the Russians and the Chinese, certainly on the diplomatic front, but how much direct or indirect support is Russia and China going to be seen to give? That remains uncertain. Information, of course, continues to come out. But yeah, you see all these people who, Saudi Arabia and Syria, they should be, right with Iran. Not really so, but Candace Owens is. From open source intel, June the 17th, I honestly can't understand why Iran hasn't surrendered yet. I can't wrap my head around it. It doesn't click. They're on the verge of taking an ass whooping unlike anything we've seen before. Bookmark this. Okay, so we're just noting this. Of course, can things change? Yes, they can. That is the nature of the world. That is the nature of war. Also from open source intel yesterday afternoon, June the 17th, Iranian state media issues a warning. Tonight holds a surprise the world will remember for centuries. We didn't see that during the night. This post says, when their missiles fail, they start launching poetry threats. All right, so let's change things just slightly from the Epoch Times yesterday, June the 17th. Kraft Heinz said on Tuesday that it will not launch any new products with artificial colors in the United States and will remove the additives from its existing product portfolio by the end of 2027. Okay, so Secretary Bobby Kennedy is making some progress, certainly with Kraft Heinz, especially with a product like Heinz ketchup, which all of us at some point are going to put on something which we eat. I think this is definitely a step forward. It's a good thing, but we're still looking at least a year and a half before all of these dangerous additives are removed. Does that indicate that they have got that much product that they've already produced which has to be sold? Okay. From Visegrad yesterday afternoon, June the 17th, incoming reports of Iranian military officers seeking contact with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to declare their intent to defect. They also want to pledge their allegiance to His Majesty and his mission to lead the transition to democracy in Iran after the regime's fall. Okay, those are reports. How accurate are they? Are they rumors? We do need to recognize that there are a lot of people in Iran who want the current government gone. Okay, that is a fact. Are we going to see the government gone or not? If the crown prince from the exiled Shah, deposed Shah, comes back, could there be a smooth transition to democracy? We don't know. From Benjamin Netanyahu, from the channel Vivid. This is obviously a post from Israeli media. He says, after we win, we will expand the Abraham Accords. We will see a new Middle East. The Palestinians want to destroy Israel. We will deal with them, but the Arab world wants peace. We need to bring down the Islamic Empire in Iran. Well, one of the things I do believe, and I'm not alone in this, when this Iranian situation is over, we will see a new Middle East. And you're going to see a Middle East which is more open, a Middle East of greater cooperation. The Trump administration has wanted peace through strength and commerce. So we are going to see a new Middle East. Is that going to be immediately facilitating end-time prophecy, or are we going to see several decades of, I wouldn't call it genuine peace, but a sincere level of peace? We have to factor many different things into our possible end-time scenarios, which some of the people of the past, particularly the 1980s and 1990s dispensationalists, did not really consider. All right. I thought this was interesting. This was something that came across my feed on Facebook. And it's from the channel FactPoint. UK-based startup Pulsar Fusion is developing Sunbird, a nuclear fusion-powered rocket inspired by the sun's energy. Designed, it's not really working, but anyway, UK startup builds Sunbird, a fusion rocket that may reach 329,000 miles per hour, cutting Mars travel time to 30 days. Yeah, we're going to see more and more discussions, more and more speculation about space travel. From Jesse Waters last night on Fox News, Trump says the Ayatollah can run, but he can't hide. Israel is begging the U.S. to drop the massive penetrator on Iran's nuclear sites. Tehran says if we do so, it'll go berserk on us. Trump has a big decision to make, and it will be his most consequential decision. And thus far, we have not seen any more violent activity. But we wait. Trump is enacting maximum pressure right now. But are we going to see him actually go through with what at least some in the Israeli government are hoping. This should disturb us a great deal. This is not the only post I've seen. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China is rapidly building its nuclear arsenal and could have as many intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, as the US or Russia by 2030. Currently, China holds around 600 nuclear warheads, increasing approximately 100 per year, and may reach 1,000 warheads by 2030 or up to 1,500 by 2035. I sincerely hope every one of you at some point prays for world peace, because while I am of the mindset that we do need here in the United States and in the West a strong defense, nuclear weapons are still an abomination, okay? How many nuclear weapons exist which could annihilate the human species, 5 times over, 10 times over? We don't need them. We need to be reducing nuclear weapons, not increasing them. So this is something I find very upsetting, and you should as well. From the channel Vivid, Candace Owens calls Netanyahu the synagogue of Satan. Don't you just love Candace Owens? Not really. It says, Benjamin Netanyahu is a hero leading the Jewish people in a war against one of the most genocidal Islamic regimes humankind has ever seen, fighting for all of Western civilization. Candace has completely lost her mind. Now, in a future Messianic Insider, we are going to discuss the synagogue of Satan appearing in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. The Messianic community, Messianic Judaism, often does not have a very good handle on those passages because of how it has been used in the past and even in the present in anti-Semitic situations. And so a lot of Messianic Jewish examiners just rush off and conclude that those who say they are Jews but of the synagogue of Satan is just speaking of non-Jewish people, Gentiles who claim to be Jews and are not. Unfortunately, just rushing off to that interpretation can be seen to exclude important information, especially the martyrdom of Polycarp, who was put to death in Smyrna in the early 2nd century. We do have a frequently asked question volume 2 tab on the synagogue of Satan, so you can go and read it. It is engaged with various examiners on Revelation. But what do you do about the martyrdom of Polycarp and how, while Polycarp was burned at the stake by the Romans, the Jewish community in Smyrna played a role in his death? So, Synagogue of Satan does have a legitimate Jewish component to it, but it pertained to the early 2nd century CE, not all Jews for all time, as can be inappropriately applied, especially by a crazy ass bitch, I'm sorry, like Candace Owens. From Open Source Intel Defender, according to ABC News, U.S. officials signaled that the next 24 to 48 hours, that's our time right now, would be critical in determining whether a diplomatic solution with Iran is possible, or if the president might resort to military action instead. Officials continue to assess that Iran is now in such a weak position that it could be forced to come back to the negotiating table and ultimately accept a deal requiring it to abandon all further nuclear enrichment. However, sources familiar with President Trump and his mindset state that the president has grown increasingly frustrated with Iran's inability to provide the administration with immediate answers, while appearing highly disinclined to allow for a situation to unfold where it appears as if Tehran has successfully called his bluff of military action against nuclear facilities inside Iran. Indeed, pray for the president, pray for his all of those around him, pray for Israel, all those around Netanyahu. We all want Iran to give up its nuclear aspirations, for the current regime to just fold up, go into exile, for the crown prince, for the Shah to return, and for some kind of democracy to be restored as once existed. We'll see. From Vivid, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei is in the worst state he has ever been in following Israel's relentless attacks, with most senior officials around him dead, according to Reuters. This mass murderer monster will soon be wiped out from the face of the earth. Indeed, this is not the first time we've reported on this. He's still alive, but everyone in his inner circle pretty much is gone. So who can he trust? He's not familiar with all the replacements. And then some of those replacements get taken out. So the replacements are the replacements. Also from open source intel Defender. This is from this morning, early this morning, 1:26 a.m. According to a U.S. official who spoke with the Wall Street Journal, Israel is now beginning to run low on Arrow 2-3 missile interceptors, which have been used to shoot down hundreds of ballistic missiles fired by Iran and the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen since Friday, with the U.S. also expended interceptors at an alarming rate, using several of the U.S. Army's terminal high-altitude area defense batteries deployed in Israel, as well as Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers with the U.S. Navy in the eastern Mediterranean. Officials and analysts still believe that Iran has more missiles than both Israel and the U.S. have interceptors, which is why the Israeli Air Force has been heavily targeting surface-to-surface missile launchers and other launch infrastructure so much in Iran. Yeah, how much of this is going to come down to who has the ammunition, who has the missiles. Okay, so we got 5 more stories to go through. Nick Fuentes. Some of you all know all about him. And here he is on InfoWars. Alex Jones. Nick Fuentes says that if Israel wins, it would gain full dominance over the Middle East, annex the West Bank, fully control Jerusalem, and rebuild the Third Temple. Sounds like a number of things people believe is going to happen in the end times, right? Sounds good. Never thought I'd agree with this idiot. That's Vivid's observation. Who's in favor? Well, we do not wish to speak presumptuously, but we know Nick Fuentes is no friend of Israel and the Jewish people. We know Alex Jones is a loudmouth conspiracy theorist. We know he's not really as much of a friend of Israel either. Our loyalty is to the Holy Scriptures, to the God of Israel. We don't want to see prophecy unnecessarily accelerated. But these are things many of us do look for based on how we read the Word of God. From the New York Post, earlier today, the 18th of June, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, defiantly declared Wednesday that Tehran isn't frightened by President Trump's absurd rhetoric, as he rejected the United States' demand to surrender in its war with Israel. Okay, this is reposted from Charlie Kirk. President Trump, Iran suggested they come to the White House for talks. I said it's very late to be talking. There's a big difference between now and a week ago. They even suggested they come to the White House. That's courageous, but you know, it's not like easy for them to do. And our final story here. This is from open source intel this morning. According to CNN polling, a staggering 83% of Republicans and 79% of Democrats oppose Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans support U.S. airstrikes to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now, whether you agree or disagree with CNN, mainstream media, those numbers, if at all accurate, are pretty high. And we know this is a situation many people in the world are paying attention to. Many people are praying for the president. They're praying for Prime Minister Netanyahu. They're praying for the Iranians, that those who have lived under this despotic regime can get their country back. But we're also praying for peace to prevail. And I think that while many of us are of the position that we are taking some giant leaps forward toward the second coming, toward the return of the Lord, we don't want to see loss of life. We don't want to see Iranians or Israelis be consumed in this war and then experience a Messiahless eternity. But what we do want to see is peace to prevail. We want to see Iran give up their nuclear aspirations, and we want to see what is going to unfold. And right now, there are people in the Messianic community who are paying attention to this, but there are others who are not, whether they don't know how to approach this because they were burned by some of the prophecy paranoia of the 1990s, the 2000s. They're just sick and tired of people making false predictions and prognostications. They're not capable of just monitoring things and recognize that we live in the real world, and whether this has direct or indirect prophecy significance, the world is going to be different. The Middle East is going to be different when this is over, and we have to adjust accordingly to that. I don't know. But one of the things I do know is that I greatly appreciate all of you who send me encouraging messages and notes. You are very grateful that we do Messianic Insider 5 times a week. We have this ongoing conversation among ourselves. I do have to say that with the Messiah 2025 conference coming up in less than 2 weeks now, our broadcast schedule is going to be disrupted, but we'll discuss that as we get closer to our departure. But you very much appreciate that I make the effort to reach out to you every day. You get to see me. You get to hear from me every day. And this ongoing conversation, I think, is very important as we try to remain grounded, try to remain level-headed and fair-minded regarding the world in which we live, theologically and current events related. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.